What's going on, everybody? 2022 is just around the corner, and there's gonna be a bunch of servants coming out in FGO then. And in today's video, I'm gonna talk about who I think are the top 5 best 5-star servants to roll for in 2022. So, let's begin. At number 5, we got the 5-star foreigner, Voyager. Voyager is a quick-based servant, and his first skill is he increases his own MP gauge by 50%, applies debuff immunity to himself for 3 turns, and gains 10 crit stars. Always nice for 50% quick charger as well as 10 crit stars. Hey, those never hurt to get as well. And his second skill is Swing by A. It is a 20% quick card effectiveness. It gives him evade for 1 turn, and it decreases quick resistance for a single enemy for 3 turns. The quick card effectiveness for 3 turns is nice, however it's a bit unfortunate that the quick resist is only to a single enemy, as you'd mainly want to use Voyager for looping. And his third skill increases crit star gather rate for an ally for 1 turn, increases the crit strength for all allies for 3 turns, and increases crit rate resistance for all allies for 3 turns. This is a pretty nice skill because you increase the star gather rate for any ally, and you also increase their crit damage for that turn as well, so hey, really nice. His MP is an AoE quick MP that deals special damage to enemies with the Heaven attribute. It also increases the MP gauge for all allies by 20%, and if the servant is a pseudo-servant such as Muramasa, Mash, Istar, Kuro, they also get an additional 10% MP gauge after Voyager's MP. The special attack damage against Heaven attribute enemies is really nice. It can cause them to outdamage some of his other AoE quick counterparts such as Dante's. The main scenario where you'd want to use Voyager is in a Scotty quick loop composition. With Scotty's recent MP upgrade where she now gives a party-wide attack buff, Voyager's ability to increase the MP gauge of Scotty across multiple turns is really nice, since you do actually want to start to MP with Scotty now if possible because of that attack buff. Overall, Voyager is a pretty great servant to use in quick looping compositions. Voyager's first banner will come with the Fate Requiem collab in the end of May, and oh boy, that event is not very fun with that stupid board game mechanic. At number 4, we got another foreigner servant, Yang. She is a single target art servant. Her first skill applies invincibility to herself for 1 turn. It increases her own MP gauge every turn for 3 turns by 10%. It also acts as a star bomb. After rank up, it will give her up to 25 stars. And her fourth effect applies taunt to male enemies for 1 turn pre-rank up, and then after rank up, it applies taunt to all enemies. This is really nice because it allows her to soak up a whole bunch of damage for free, as well as increases her own MP gauge and gives the team a whole bunch of stars. Her second skill decreases the MP gauge for all enemies, as well as increasing her own MP gauge by up to 20%, as well as decreases the defense for all enemies by 20%. Her third skill is that when she's attacked, she applies a defense down by 10% to an enemy. She also applies burn to that enemy when attacked, and it also increases her own defense by up to 20%. This skill is really nice to pair with the first skill and popping them on the same turn, because the first skill makes the enemies attack her, and when she's attacked, she's invincible. She will start burning the enemy. She'll apply defense down to the enemy. So really nice to pair with her first skill. Her MP is a single target arts MP that deals special damage to enemies that are burning, and it also applies burn to that enemy for 3 turns. So it works really well with her kit. Overall, I really like using Yang in any sort of challenging content, so like any of the recent story nodes have been really nice, challenge quests. As long as there's not an alter ego, she'll do wonders for you. Her first banner is actually coming up this New Year's, so hopefully you have the courts ready to try and summon her. At number 3, we have Summer Kiara, who is an AoE Arts Moon Cancer and has an awesome summon animation. Her first skill, A lot of effects. It applies Guts to herself one time for 5 turns. Very nice. It removes all debuffs from herself. Cool. Restores her own HP for 3 turns, 2,000 per turn. It increases her own MP strength by 20% for 3 turns. So, there's more. It also applies a mermaid status stack each turn, and I will go into more of that in a bit. This skill has a little bit of everything, and it's just overall a really nice skill. Guts is always good. Cleansing debuffs from yourself is always good. Restoring 2,000 HP for 3 turns, always nice. And increasing her own MP strength by 20% for 3 turns. Just overall a really, really good skill on that alone. And now I'm going to talk more about the benefits of this mermaid stacking. So at the end of the turn, she gets this mermaid stack, and you want to use it for the other skills. So her second skill, the 2 effects are it increases her own MP gauge, and it also gives her crit stars. Without any mermaid stacks, it's a 30% MP charge and 20 crit stars. However, if you use this skill while you have a mermaid stack, it will consume mermaid stacks and increase the effects of the skill. So if you have 1 mermaid stack and use this skill, it's a 40% MP gauge and 25 crit stars. And if you have 2 mermaid stacks, it is a 50% MP gauge and 30 crit stars. Unfortunately, you can't say, I only want to use 1 mermaid stack instead of 2. If you have 2, you're using both of them. If you have 1, you're using that 1. However, you can't use more than 2, so if you have 3 or 4, it will only use those 2. Her third skill has 5 effects, and 3 of them are affected by the mermaid stacks. So the 2 that are not affected are, it applies evade for all allies 1 time for 3 turns, and it also removes the sure hit buffs from all enemies. Now, the third effect, with no mermaid stacks, it decreases the defense by 20% for all enemies, and decreases art resistance for all enemies by 20% for 3 turns. And then with 1 mermaid stack, the defense decrease goes up to 25% and the arts resistance goes up to 25%. 2 mermaid stacks, 30% for defense and art resistance. This is a huge steroid, and I highly recommend saving your mermaid stacks if you can for this buff. And I'll show you on screen what's playing in the background, the difference in damages between a 0 mermaid stack NP and a 2 mermaid stack NP with this buff. And speaking of her NP, mermaid stacks matter for that too. They matter because of the 5th effect of the skill. So whenever you use it, if you have 0 mermaid stacks, you apply 1 stack of this debuff called Fascination, and it goes up by 1 time for each stack. So 1 mermaid stack, they get 2. 2 mermaid stacks, they get 3. Her MP is an AoE Arts MP that deals 20% extra special attack damage per mental debuff, aka that Fascination debuff stack, and it can stack up to 10 times. And I think you technically can use other mental debuffs in that stacks, but you're mainly just going to be using it because of that Fascination buff. And on top of that, there's a chance of inflicting instant death, but this one applies after the damage, so you don't, if you're trying to loop with her, which you sort of can, you don't have to worry about that because it applies after you do all the damage, which is really nice, and I wish I did that with all the other instant death. Overall, I think Summer Kiara is a fantastic unit. She can work in a whole bunch of different scenarios, from challenging content to arts looping. Just, she can do it all. Her kit gives her sort of everything she needs to do sort of anything. Even though she might not excel at one particular thing, she can do a whole bunch of things really, really well. And it's a reason why I rate her so high. At number 2, we have Ashiya Doman. Doman is a AoE quick-based servant, and his first skill decreases the attack of all enemies by 20%, decreases the defense of all enemies by 30% for 3 turns. It applies Terror for 3 turns, which is a chance to stun all enemies. Applies Confusion to all enemies for 3 turns, and also applies Curse to all enemies for 3 turns. If you're using Doman in any type of looping or lotto farming scenarios, you'd want to pop this skill last, but if you're using it for sort of more challenging content, you can go ahead and pop this skill turn 1. The skill applies a whole bunch of just debuffs on the enemies, and that curse damage is nice, and I will explain why a little later on. His second skill applies Guts 2 times for 5 turns, which, hey, Guts, really nice. Increases the crit strength for all evil allies for 3 turns by up to 50%, and then it also further increases crit strength for all chaotic allies by 50% for 3 turns. A lot of evil enemies are chaotic, so a lot of times you're double dipping in that sort of niche. His final skill, it increases his own MP gauge by 80%, which is huge. It increases attack for all evil allies by 20% for 3 turns. Increases attack for all chaotic allies by 20% for 3 turns, and inflicts curse on all enemies for 5 turns, dealing 2,000 curse damage. Pretty nice, which I'll get into later. But that 80% MP gauge is huge, as well as the double dipping again in attack damage. With that 80% MP gauge, I've seen a lot of crazy different lotto comps you can do with double Domans, and I would say even as of right now, he's one of the best servants to have for these sort of lotto teams that a lot of people are going to be looking forward to using. And with his MP, it's an AoE quick MP that deals damage to all enemies. It applies Curse to all enemies, 1000 damage for 5 turns, 120% chance to apply instant death, and it also applies Curse damage up by 5 turns, and at base overcharge it is a 100% curse damage increase, which is double damage. You can sort of keep stacking all these curses, and that's like damage after his already insanely good NP. So I've seen like 40,000, 50,000 stacked curse damage, and it's pretty nutty for even challenging content. So not only is he really good at sort of lotto composition farming, he's also pretty dang good at sort of challenging content with all this stacking curse effects, his guts. Really good servant overall. And to the surprise of no one, number 1 is the meta-defining arts support servant herself, Castoria. Her first skill increases the attack for all allies by 20% and increases the MP gauge for all allies by 30%. Attack steroid, MP gauge. Always really, really nice to have. Her second skill increases the MP gauge for an ally by 20% and increases MP gain for all allies, including herself, for 30%. So with double Castoria, a single ally is getting a 60% MP gain on top of already all the insane MP gain from arts. Really, really, really good. Oh, and the 20% MP gauge times 2. Absolutely insane for looping. And her third skill increases art card effectiveness for an ally for 3 turns by 50%. Applies invincibility to an ally for 1 turn, because why not? And applies special attack to threat against humanities to an ally for 3 turns, 50%. Just if it was just the 50% art steroid, that would be more than enough. But you know what? Let's give another 50% extra special attack to threat to humanity enemies. Oh, and also a turn of invincibility, because why not? So now her MP increases the attack for all allies by 30% at MP1, and it scales to 50% at MP5, so it's useful to get extra MP copies of her, just saying. It also clears debuffs for all allies, really good. But you know what, there's more. Depending on the overcharge, it will also give a new status which we call True Invincibility, and Ignore Invincibility skills do not work on this. And at charge 1, it's 1 time. 2, it's 2 times. 300%, 3 times. And all the way up to 500%, 5 times. This True Invincibility is a really, really, really nice defensive buff because it can't be pierced. And that's just, that's just the overcharge effect. That's not even accounting for the increased attack and clearing of all debuffs. Overall, Castoria's kit is absolutely bonkers. Increased attack damage, MP gain, 50% MP gauge, that's also split across 2 skills, really nice. Arch card buffs, threat against humanity buffs, clearing all debuffs, true invincibility. The only sort of real thing she's lacking is healing, and so if you're going to do any sort of arch looping, double Castoria is definitely the way to go. But if you're doing sort of more challenging content, such as trying to clear story or challenge quests, I'd recommend bringing a Castoria and a Tamamo, because Tamamo provides that healing, and also the decrease in skill cooldowns, which paired with Castoria is an absolutely insane combo. Some honorable mentions I just want to throw out here towards the end is Dioscuri, who is a single target arch saber. Unfortunately gets overshadowed a bit by Hokusai Saber, but I still think it's a really good servant. There's Odysseus, AoE arch rider, and then there is actually a 4-star Murasaki Summer, who is a single target arch rider. All 3 of those are just sort of honorable mentions I wanted to quickly go and give you guys. Anyways, that's going to do it for me. Let me know in the comments who you're most excited to roll for this next year, and if you think somebody else should have been on the list that I didn't place, or if you think somebody should have been placed higher or lower. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Later.